If you've ever caught yourself replaying a conversation in your head and asking, why did she say that? You're not alone. Most men are taught that understanding women comes from listening harder, paying closer attention to every word, and analyzing every sentence for hidden meaning. But that belief is exactly what keeps men confused. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. Words are not where clarity lives, they are where confusion begins. Women don't primarily speak to explain themselves. They speak to manage emotion, maintain harmony, and protect how they're perceived. Language for them is often emotional camouflage. It smooths situations, avoids conflict, and keeps things socially safe. That doesn't make it dishonest, it makes it human. The mistake men make is assuming that words are direct reflections of truth. They're not. Words are flexible, emotional, and highly influenced by mood, context, and social pressure. When you take them literally, you start chasing certainty in a place where certainty doesn't exist. You analyze texts, overthink pauses, and look for logic in something driven by feeling. Real understanding doesn't come from listening harder, it comes from observing deeper. The moment you stop searching for truth in her words and start paying attention to her behavior, everything changes. Confusion fades, guessing stops. You begin to see what actually matters, not what sounds good, but what's real. And that shift is where clarity, confidence, and control begin. To understand why words so often mislead men, you have to understand what language represents emotionally. For many women, words are not tools for precise communication. They are tools for safety, connection, and social balance. Language isn't used to reveal raw truth. It's used to protect feelings, manage impressions, and avoid negative judgment. From a young age, women learn that how something sounds often matters more than how it feels. They are rewarded for being agreeable, emotionally aware, and socially polished. As a result, their words tend to pass through multiple filters. How will this be received? How will this make me look? Will this create conflict? By the time a sentence is spoken, it may reflect what feels appropriate, not what feels instinctive. This is why men get confused. A man hears words and assumes they are a direct statement of desire or intention, but often, a woman's words describe her ideal self, not her current emotional reality. They represent who she wants to be seen as, not always what she is responding to in the moment. This isn't deception, it's internal conflict. Emotion and logic don't always align, and when they clash, language tends to serve emotion. Words become a social shield, not a psychological confession. That's why understanding women requires a different lens. When you stop treating words as final truth and start seeing them as emotional positioning, you remove their power to confuse you. The real message isn't in what she says, it's in what she consistently does when no explanation is required. There is a fundamental difference between what people say and what they do, and nowhere is that gap more revealing than in attraction. Words come from the conscious mind, actions come from the nervous system. One is shaped by thought and image, the other is driven by instinct. That's why actions always carry more truth. When a woman's words and behavior align, there's no confusion. The problem begins when they don't. She may say she values honesty, stability, or emotional maturity, yet find herself drawn to situations that contradict those statements. When men take her words as absolute truth, they end up negotiating with a version of her that exists only in language, not in reality. This disconnect is explained in psychology as cognitive dissonance, the tension between what someone believes or says and what they actually do. Most people resolve that tension not by changing behavior, but by adjusting the story they tell themselves. Words become the narrative that protects identity, while actions quietly reveal desire. Men lose clarity when they trust explanations over evidence. They hear reasons, excuses, and emotional justifications, then ignore the pattern forming right in front of them. But patterns don't lie. If attention fades, effort disappears, or investment shifts elsewhere, that behavior is the answer, regardless of how reassuring the words sound. Understanding this changes everything. You stop reacting emotionally to statements and start observing objectively. You no longer argue with contradictions, you note them. Because once you learn to trust behavior over speech, confusion loses its grip and reality becomes clear without a single argument. From an early age, men are taught a simple rule: listen more and you'll understand better. Respect her feelings, hear her out, don't interrupt. On the surface, this sounds wise, but taken literally, it becomes a trap. Because listening alone does not equal understanding, especially when words are emotionally driven rather than logically fixed. Women often communicate through emotion first, meaning their language reflects how they feel in that moment. Feelings shift, contexts change, and moods evolve. What sounds true at one point in the day may feel completely different later. Yet men, who are naturally wired to seek consistency and structure, treat spoken words like stable commitments. They replay conversations, analyze messages, and search for certainty where none was intended. This is how men get lost. Instead of watching behavior, they study sentences. Instead of noticing changes in effort or energy, they focus on tone, phrasing, and timing. The more they listen, the more confused they become, because they're trying to extract logic from something shaped by emotion. The real mistake isn't listening, it's stopping there. Listening without observation creates imbalance. When you take every word at face value, you stop noticing the contradictions that quietly reveal the truth. You assume meaning instead of verifying it through action. Understanding doesn't come from decoding language. It comes from noticing patterns. The moment you shift from analyzing what she says to observing what she does, the fog clears. You stop guessing, you stop overthinking, and you begin responding to reality instead of words. Few sentences confuse men more than, "I'm not ready for a relationship." Most men hear this as a firm, logical decision and respond by doing what they were taught to do: respect it. They pull back, give space, and assume timing is the issue. Then, weeks later, they see her emotionally invested in someone else, and the confusion turns into self-doubt. What most men don't realize is that this statement is often emotionally true in the moment it's spoken. It reflects how she feels with you, not a permanent rule about relationships. Attraction isn't a fixed plan, it's a response. When a new emotional stimulus appears, behavior adjusts to match it, even if previous words say otherwise. This isn't betrayal, it's biology. Emotional responses can override intention without warning. When that happens, the mind doesn't stop to renegotiate old statements. It simply follows the new feeling. Later, the story gets rewritten to make sense of the action. Men tend to internalize this as failure. They assume they said or did something wrong, but the truth is simpler. Words expressed uncertainty. Behavior revealed choice. One was temporary, the other was decisive. The lesson isn't to argue with what she says, it's to stop treating words as final truth. When you understand that statements are emotional snapshots, not lifelong commitments, you stop taking them personally and start seeing reality clearly. Almost every man has heard the same advice: be kind, be patient, be understanding. So he does exactly that. He listens attentively, supports her emotionally, offers compliments, and makes himself consistently available. He believes that if he shows enough care, appreciation will naturally turn into attraction. But instead of desire, he receives gratitude. Instead of intimacy, he becomes trusted and then overlooked. This is the nice guy paradox. Kindness, when it's driven by the hope of being chosen, loses its power. It stops being a genuine expression and starts feeling like a quiet negotiation. If I give enough, maybe I'll be valued. Women sense this dynamic instantly. It doesn't feel confident or secure, it feels approval-seeking. Attraction isn't built through comfort alone, it's built through emotional contrast. When a man is completely predictable, always agreeable, and endlessly accommodating, there's no tension, no polarity, no spark. Emotional safety increases, but desire slowly fades. This doesn't mean kindness is unattractive. It means kindness without boundaries lacks weight. A man who gives freely, but also withholds when necessary, communicates self-respect. He's capable of empathy without being dependent on validation. The difference is emotional autonomy. A grounded man doesn't try to earn desire. He allows it to form naturally. He chooses when to invest rather than overextending himself, and paradoxically, that restraint is what makes his kindness meaningful and his presence compelling. Attraction doesn't grow in sameness, it grows in contrast. This contrast is what psychologists often describe as emotional polarity, the natural tension created when two energies are distinct yet complementary. Without polarity, relationships feel flat, comfortable maybe, but emotionally dull. Many men misunderstand this and assume that leading or setting boundaries means being controlling or cold. In reality, true polarity has nothing to do with dominance. It's about presence. A man who is grounded, calm, and self directed creates a sense of stability that allows attraction to develop. He doesn't chase reactions or adjust himself to fit emotional shifts. He remains steady. Respect is the foundation of this dynamic. When a woman respects a man, her nervous system relaxes. She doesn't feel the need to manage him or test his emotional balance. That sense of security allows affection to grow naturally. Without respect, any connection becomes fragile, no matter how kind or attentive the man is. This is why many women say they want equality, but feel most drawn to a man who leads. It's not a contradiction, it's instinct. Leadership here means direction without pressure, confidence without arrogance, and strength without force. Polarity isn't about overpowering someone, it's about holding your ground. When a man maintains his center while remaining emotionally available, he becomes someone she can lean into rather than manage. And that shift, from managing to admiring, is where attraction truly begins. There is a specific category men fall into that feels safe but never romantic. He's reliable, attentive, emotionally available, and always willing to listen. She trusts him, confides in him, and even seeks his advice about other men. From the outside, it looks like closeness. In reality, attraction has already disappeared. The friend zone isn't created by rejection, it's created by emotional neutrality. When a man removes all tension in an effort to appear safe, he unintentionally erases polarity. His sexual presence fades into the background, and the connection becomes familiar rather than exciting. Comfort grows, but desire has no space to form. Many men are told that patience and emotional support will eventually be rewarded, but this advice isn't about attraction, it's about safety. Being patient keeps you available. Being supportive makes you dependable. Neither of those qualities, on their own, create desire. When she says, "You're such a good friend," it's not an invitation, it's a boundary. It signals that she no longer feels emotional contrast with you. There's nothing to lean into, nothing to respond to instinctively. Men who escape this position don't do it by trying harder. They do it by pulling back, restoring boundaries, and reclaiming their sense of self. Attraction returns only when polarity returns. The moment you stop being emotionally predictable and start valuing your own presence, the dynamic shifts or it ends. And clarity, either way, is freedom. Once you stop taking words personally, a new skill becomes available to you: observation. Reading behavior isn't about manipulation or control, it's about clarity. When you learn what to look for, attraction stops being confusing and starts becoming obvious. Behavior always leaves patterns, and patterns always tell the truth. The first level is immediate reaction. Attraction shows up fast, often before words can interfere. When you enter a space, notice where her attention goes. Does her posture open or close? Does her tone change when she speaks to you? These micro responses happen instinctively. They can't be rehearsed or faked for long because they come from the nervous system, not conscious intent. The second level is consistency over time. This is where most men fail. They focus on what she says instead of what repeats. She may claim she's busy, but still finds time to engage. She may say she wants clarity, but avoids direct moments of connection. When words and actions conflict, trust the pattern. Consistency reveals priority. The third level is investment. This is the clearest signal of all. Who moves the interaction forward? Does she initiate, make plans, or try to reconnect when distance appears? Interest naturally expresses itself through effort. When a woman cares, she invests time, energy, and attention without being asked. When you learn to read these three levels, you stop chasing reassurance. You no longer need verbal confirmation because behavior has already answered the question. Attraction becomes visible, measurable, and calm to understand. And with that understanding comes emotional control. Everything comes down to one simple truth. Confusion isn't caused by women, it's caused by misinterpretation. Men get hurt not because they weren't told the truth, but because they trusted words while ignoring evidence. Language is emotional, it's expressive, flexible, and often inconsistent. Behavior, on the other hand, is instinctive and revealing. A woman's words are not promises, they are expressions of how she feels in a moment. They can be thoughtful, sincere, and still temporary. Her actions, however, show what she prioritizes when emotion takes the lead. That's why they matter more. You'll never control what someone says, and you'll never decode every mood or sentence. But you can always observe patterns. The moment you stop reacting to emotional language and start watching behavior, your power returns. You no longer chase reassurance or explanations. You don't argue with contradictions or demand clarity. You stay grounded, calm, and attentive. And in that stillness, the truth always reveals itself. This shift isn't about resentment, manipulation, or blame, it's about awareness. When you operate from evidence instead of emotion, you free yourself from overthinking and uncertainty. You stop negotiating your worth and start respecting your time. Remember this and keep it close. Words are polite, actions are honest. If you want clarity, stop listening for comfort and start observing for truth. That's where confidence begins and confusion ends.